Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to It's Rainmaking Time. This is Kim Greenhouse. It gives me great pleasure to welcome Jonathan Bailey. He is a copyright consultant, and he has a website called Plagiarism Today. He also is the founder of Copybyte.com, and through an agonizing experience, when 6 years of his writing and poetry and literature had been stolen online, he was called into this profession to help people not plagiarize each other. He is an expert in this area, even though he's not legal counsel. He works with legal counsel, and he helps people stay legal online. He does a lot more than that. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome Jonathan Bailey to It's Rainmaking Time. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me.
I feel bad after what happened to you. After 6 years of writing was lifted from the net from you. It goes to show you that sometimes the pathway into a person's calling isn't always goodness. Sometimes it's heartache.
Yeah.
Your calling now is due to the heartache you went through.
It was definitely a very difficult time for me when it happened. It was one of those things where it was a very emotional moment for me, but I find that having been through that and having had that emotional experience, I can connect with artists who are going through it. Because, if you go to an attorney or something like that, they can help you. They can help you with the law, but they don't always empathize. They don't always have the emotional connection there. And sometimes that is just as important as being knowledgeable about the law and what you can do service-wise.
I want to talk a little bit about the issue of plagiarism and content theft, copyright infringement, and what these things mean, actually. Definitions are important because they create the understanding for people listening. Many of us have gone to websites where we see exact or similar content lifted from other sites and slapped down there. And I really want you to talk about what it is, what these distinctions are.
Well, the distinctions, there's a lot of overlap between them. It's a situation where we're talking about different shapes, and they can have an overlap at times. Plagiarism generally is described as the taking of someone else's work, whether it's whether it's a written work, a photograph, or anything else, and claiming it to be your own. Or simply leaving off attribution and letting people assume it to be your own is another way. Copyright infringement is sort of the legal term for violating copyright law. And what copyright law does is it provides a series of exclusive rights to the copyright holder, which is usually the creator of the work. That person has a set of rights, and if they're violated, it becomes a copyright infringement. And one of those is, of course, to post copies of the work without permission online. Now, you can commit copyright infringement without plagiarism. If you take someone's work, put it on your site wholesale without permission, and you leave their name on it, it's still a copyright infringement, but it's not a plagiarism. And likewise, you can commit plagiarism without copyright infringement. For example, if you, for some stupid reason, tried to claim the works of Shakespeare to be your own, it would be a horrible plagiarism, but it wouldn't be a copyright infringement because the copyright on those has long since expired. And you can also plagiarize ideas and concepts, too, sometimes, which are things that are not protectable by copyright. And content theft, the third one, is kind of a general thing you see online where site's content in large part is being taken and put on another site, oftentimes by an automated process. And it's this idea of this massive taking of content. And sometimes it's attributed, sometimes it's not. But it's this idea of sort of an en masse repurposing of content. That's my personal definition of content theft. But that's, like I said, a term that's very much new to the Internet, still in many ways unsettled.
There's something called attribution. What is that? What does that mean?
Well, attribution is when you give credit to someone else for their work. For example, if you were to quote me and say, this is a quote by Jonathan Bailey, that by Jonathan Bailey part would be the attribution. And so basically, anytime that you use someone else's work and you give credit, you say who it's by, that by part is the attribution.
And so what about people that have article-rich sites and they buy a piece of software called Article Wizard? Someone tried to get me to buy Article Wizard to take an article and completely restructure it and spit out totally new articles. What is that?
There's a whole slew of these programs, and they kind of fall into a giant umbrella known as article spinners. I've heard them called article wizards. I've heard them called content generators. There's a whole variety of tools here. But basically what they do is they take the content of an article or any text piece, really. It doesn't have to be necessarily an article. It can be something very short even. And they swap out words or rearrange it in such a way that it appears to be a new work. Now, a good example of this problem is you have a simple sentence. We'll say, the cat went into the house. The article spinner might take a look at two of those words, cat and house, find synonyms for them, and start plugging those in. So you might get a sentence like, the feline went into the abode, or, the calico went into the home. Something like that. It can get quite ridiculous.
That's really frightening. Really frightening.
But see, the scary thing is, and this is what to think about, with that simple sentence, if you can come up with 5 synonyms for each of those words, each of those 2 words I mentioned, you can have 25 iterations of that sentence. 5 times 5 is 25. And that's just a little short 5-word sentence there. Imagine doing that over a 1,000-word article. You can come up with literally millions of iterations of a simple article that way, but most of them are going to be completely garbage. And it has to do with what I call the ship versus boat problem. If I say Christopher Columbus arrived on 3 ships, you've got an image of what a ship is. It's a big thing with masts and all that stuff. But if I say Christopher Columbus came on 3 boats, that's a slightly different image, especially in the modern age where we think of boats as being things you put around in a lake. They're technically synonyms, but they have different subtle meanings to us. And that's where these article spinners really fail. They don't catch the subtle context of these words. And they create terms, and they create articles typically that either sound like someone's really struggling to learn English or literally sound like it was created by a computer, one or the other. So that tends to be what happens. The content's usually very poor, but it's designed, systems are designed to avoid detection, both by plagiarism checkers and by Google, so that way Google doesn't think it's duplicate content and treat it as spam.
So Google checks this?
Google checks everything that is out there on the web, and what it does is it takes a look at multiple sets of content. For example, if I post an article and you post a copy of it, either with permission or without, so now there's 2 copies of this article on the internet, and someone does a search for a term that Google says that article is the best thing for them to find, that needs to be number 1. Google will take a look and decide which one of these is the authentic article. And it will put that one up, and the other one will get knocked down to what is known as supplemental index, which is sometimes you'll see it in Google if you do like really weird queries sometimes that click here for articles that were, click here for pages that were extremely similar, that little thing at the very bottom. Can't remember what the text exactly says, but it's a little thing that lets you know there was more articles to search through. Basically, no one sees it there. And the problem is, and that can work for us and against us, if Google gets it right, the spammers and the people who come after you get bumped down into that. They don't hurt you much. It's no big deal. You might not even know they're ever there. But if they get it wrong, they can put the plagiarists and the spammers and whatnot ahead of you and kick you out.
Wow. So what's the remedy of prevention for this?
Well, the main thing with text work especially, there's not much you can do to prevent your text from being copied. The reason is your text is being transported deliberately in a method that can be easily copied and easily read by machines. So there's not much you can do about prevention. The key is really monitoring and tracking your content, understanding where it appears on the web. And there's a lot of ways you can do that. So we'll talk about some of the more popular ones, but there are various services out there that will let you search for your content, find where it's being used, and if you find it, you can file cease and desist notices to get the person to remove it. You can file takedown notices with the host, and also if you get desperate and you're just really worried about the Google problem, you can file takedown notices with Google and get their sites removed out of Google's index. It's basically a way to tell Google, look, we're the original one, they're an infringer, please remove them.
I know the essence of what I'm asking you. I know we both know the answer to that, but I'm an original copyright owner of my own work, okay?
Yes.
And I know it because I did it, and then I released it, and I see blank on the internet. How does Google know who's who, really? Is it by date?